3 ways to increase your self-confidence. How do we do this? So number 1, remember we talked about the subconscious mind and everything that lives in there. So we have to reprogram this. This is probably the most important thing that we can do, because if a thought or idea or emotion or belief remains at that bottom of that iceberg, right, below water level, we're not aware of it, but it's still doing stuff, right? So it's crucial to bring to conscious awareness unhelpful beliefs like, I don't eat soup because it'll make me sick, to begin to transform them. And I always call self-awareness your superpower, because once you become aware of what's going on with you, and once you learn how to do that, things can really shift dramatically. But self-awareness is really at the is the most basic thing to help us to overcome a lot of these self-limiting beliefs. So rewriting these beliefs into more empowering ones is definitely one of the ways to shift your mindset from an unhelpful one. And I'm going to call it unhelpful. I'm not going to call it bad, because there's no good or bad. There's helpful and unhelpful. Yeah. So we're going to shift from unhelpful mindset into one that really supports your life and how you want to move forward. And I'm going to share here one of my favorite quotes. Some of you may know Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn is an entrepreneur and a big businessman in the United States. And he says, work harder on yourself than you do on your job. So how many of us do that? Because we're so focused on working on our jobs, aren't we? We sometimes forget about working on ourselves. And this is really kind of a lifelong thing. So when we teach our empowerment courses, the 12-week program, to the women we teach them, we tell them they're beginning a journey. This is only the beginning. You can't learn everything and do everything in 12 weeks, because it takes practice and it takes diligence and continual self-awareness and excavation of what's going on inside of you. But spending the time to work on yourself is really the most useful and what's going to move you ahead in your life. Indeed, it takes time to unlearn and relearn. Absolutely. And practice. This is like, when you're learning to play the piano, right? What do they say? Practice and practice and practice. Whenever you change thoughts, ideas, habits, behaviors, everything takes practice until it becomes your new reality. It becomes the new habit. And then it's kind of like when you're driving. You're not paying 100% focused attention because you already know how to do it. That's the whole thing about it taking time and effort continually. So the second one is focus on your strengths and uniqueness, because each one of us is unique. And as we saw from those amazing ladies, you bring something unique to the table, right? So I urge you to make a list of all the things that you're good at, whether they're attributes or talents or abilities. And I've just given you an example of what those things might be. And I also urge you to do it with the help of a loved one, somebody who really knows you well, like maybe your best friend or your partner or your sister, whoever knows you well and has your best interest at heart. And the reason I urge you to do it with someone like that is because there's often things that we don't see about ourselves that are really good and positive that somebody else sees. Yeah. I went through this process with my friend Susan, and there were things that she saw about me that I hadn't even considered. And I remember saying to her, really? And she said, yes, absolutely. You add it to that list. So this is really important for you to get really the whole picture, and don't be modest. No false modesty, and don't feel bad. I had some participants in my training program who told me this was very challenging for them to do because they were not ever taught to think about themselves in this light. They felt it was arrogant and who am I to toot my horn and so on. Forget all that, okay? Because you need to lead with your strengths. And also work on your weaknesses only if they make a huge difference in your life. So let me give you an example of how this worked for me. 20 years ago, I started my first business and I wanted to market my business. This was in the days when we actually met in person and we spoke to each other in person and we had networking events that were live. So I wanted to market my business through speaking and writing. And with the writing, I had no problem, but the speaking was a bit of a challenge. Like most people, most women, I had a lot of fears and anxiety and self-criticism. And also I didn't know things like how to breathe and how to structure things. And there was a lot of things I didn't know, but this was very important to me. So I spent the time and money and effort, and I hired a voice and presentation coach who helped me develop my speaking abilities, which changed my life in many ways, not just from a business perspective, but it actually changed the trajectory of my life, because then I got into training and I got into speaking to bigger audiences, and my self-confidence grew from having this ability, which was a weakness, but I changed it into a strength because it was so important to everything that I was doing. So those are the times when you need to really work on the weakness and turn it into a strength. Now, to give you the other side of the coin, I moved to Europe a few years ago. And of course, as you all know, in Europe, everybody pretty much drives standard transmission or stick shift. And I don't know how to drive that. I can only do automatic because I spent 3 decades in Canada. We don't have those kinds of cars here. So I thought, okay, now that I'm living in Europe, I really should learn how to drive stick. I took a few lessons. And while I understood cognitively what all my 4 limbs were supposed to be doing at different times, when I got out on the road, I froze. And it was a very scary experience for me as the instructor. And so I spent some time after that thinking about it. And I thought, unless I spend a lot more time and money and effort to really master the skill, it's not going to happen. And so I looked at the big picture of my life and I thought, does it make sense for me to be doing that? And the answer was no, because there are automatic cars in Europe, and yeah, they're harder to find and more expensive, but I can make do. The most interesting part about the story I want you to take away is that I didn't beat up on myself because I couldn't master the skill. I didn't feel bad. It's not like my self-confidence plummeted. I didn't say to myself, why can't I learn this? So many other people can do it. You know, those things are irrelevant. It's just something that I cannot do, and that's okay. And I just moved on. So the next thing I want to tell you is that your self-worth is the most important part. And that's why we don't beat up on ourselves, because we are always worthy. Whatever our accomplishments are, whatever we do with our lives, we are always worthy. And this is really good to remember, especially as we begin to age and we are not able to make an impact in the world as we would like to. Our self-worth should not go down just because we don't have the capacity to do what we did before. This is something to keep in mind as you age. Your self-worth is not based on anything except that you are a human being and you bring your unique you, in however way that you do it. Yeah. So self-worth, the most important. Number 3. So tuning out that inner critic, which we talked about, which is just this internalized judgmental voice, which has developed over the years from whatever source. It could have been a parent, it could have been a teacher, it could have been somebody who bullied us. It doesn't really matter where it came from, but this is internalized now. So it says some really harsh, nasty things to us. It holds us back. It stops us from doing things because we are so used to listening to that voice. So it's really crucial to minimize this voice and not to listen to the doom and gloom messages that it has for us. So how do we do this? So remember that list of strengths that you completed with your BFF? Really focus on that. Remind yourself of all the abilities and also all the times you've succeeded, right? I mean, there's many things you have done, I'm sure, that you've succeeded in. So remind yourself of that. Also practice distancing yourself from this voice. So when it shows up, when you start to hear it, you can just become aware, your self-awareness, become aware of it and say, there you are again. Okay, you can go over here. I'm not listening to you right now. Yeah. So practice this. Again, it's like Mindy said, it takes time to unlearn and relearn. This is new behavior that you will be learning. And eventually you will not hear that voice anymore. I promise you, because I've gone through this process and I don't really hear it anymore. Now, start taking small risks, because taking action also improves your confidence. And even if something doesn't work out, see it as a lesson learned and not as a failure, and especially not as a global failure. Oh my God, I'm a failure. I can't get anything right. Nothing ever works out for me. All of that. None of that. Whatever you do, it either works or it's a lesson for you to learn from. So sometimes we learn what we don't want, right? We take risks, we do things and we think, oh, well, that's not really for me, is it? but you wouldn't have known if you hadn't tried. Also, practice self-care and compassion. As I said, none of us are ever taught, especially as women, to practice self-care. We're always taught to give and give and give and be there for everybody all the time. So when things don't work out, like when I couldn't learn how to drive stick shift, again, don't beat yourself up. It's just something that's happened. It's just part of your life. It's not the end of the world. And learn to care for yourself in the way that you would care for someone you love. And treat them the same way. Treat yourself the way you would treat your most loved person, your partner, your child, whoever it might be. Something else we're not taught, yeah? And then surround yourself with a loving community of people who really cherish you and care for you and who empower you and support you, as opposed to those people who put you down. Yes, so see, Celia says, I have friends who've given a name to the voice. Hugo, we hear, yeah, silence you, absolutely. And you can call, no offense to people called Hugo. Yes, so absolutely, you can name it whatever you like. You can give it a particular voice, anything that kind of makes it stand out from you. So it externalizes that voice as opposed to having it internalized. Excellent. Very good idea. Yes, very good. And the loving community, ladies, often it is a group of women. Some of the things that we teach in our program is to not see other women as people to compete with, but people we can support. And those of us, especially in the workforce, we can support each other. We can help each other's voice to be heard. And if we're in positions of management, to help our female staff really step up to the plate and believe in them. And this is really hugely important. So I'm going to leave you with this. Never dull your shine for somebody else, because we need your light to shine. All of you, each and every single one of you has this particular unique thing that you're bringing to everyone and to the world. And we really need it, ladies. So let's empower each other and continue in this way. This is just some information if you want to find me. And thank you very much. I am done. You can go to Q&A. Thank you, ladies. It's been lovely.